In this lesson, you'll learn about the Android activity component. You'll learn about its life cycle and the important methods of the activity class. The Activities API is described on the developer's website in the API guides. It provides an overview, basic description, and detailed description. I suggest that after we finish this lesson, you take the time to read through the Activity API guide. To get to it, you can follow the link here. To start our understanding of activities, let's leverage the work we did on our first app. Recall that our class MainActivity extends the activity class. We use the onCreate lifecycle method to set the content of our display. And we also use the onCreate options menu method and getInflator method from the activity class to initialize our menu. To understand more about the activity class, we can look at the description of the class on the developer's website in the reference section. At the top of the page, we see links to detail sections, a hierarchy of class extensions, links to subclasses, and a class overview. Notice that an activity is described as a single focused thing that the user can do. Now let's click on the link to the web page here, and then click on the link to methods up at the top. And what I want to show you is the immense number of methods in the activity class. Way too many for us to go through one by one. So what we'll do in this lesson and lessons to come is cover key aspects of classes as needed for that lesson. You'll be learning how to research classes when you need to for more information. One key aspect of activities is the activity lifecycle. One way to understand this is to look at the activity lifecycle methods in relation to what you see on your device. This helps me remember the phases and methods of the lifecycle. What happens during the lifecycle is that the activity methods are executed at key points, and your application can add code to be processed at those points, just as we did in the first app. As your app progresses from being launched to running to partially visible to not visible to shut down, the lifecycle methods are executed. At the beginning, you see our onCreate method we used in our first app, which sets up then displays the screen. If the user navigates away from our app to another app, but our app is partially visible, the onPause method is executed. If our app becomes completely covered, the onStop method is executed. The app is still alive, but not visible. And finally, if the system needs resources being consumed by our app, the onDestroy method will be executed and our app will be shut down. If, while partially visible, the user navigates back to the app, the onResume method would be executed. And if our app is not visible, then the user navigates back to our app. The onRestart, onStart, and onResume methods will be executed. In the Android documentation, you'll often see diagrams like this one describing life cycles and other sequences. This is a diagram of the same activity life cycle we just looked at. It's in a bit different format and provides a bit more detail. Job interviewers will often ask about the activity life cycle. So if you can commit one of these activity life cycle diagrams to memory, it'll help give you confidence in job interviews and code development. Now let's take a look at what kinds of actions your app will typically carry out associated with these lifecycle methods. The onCreate method is the only one of the activity lifecycle methods that's mandatory. Just as we did in our first app, you'll call the setContentView method to initialize the display layout. You'll also initialize variables and possibly start a background thread. In the onResume method, typical actions are to restore variables and restart animations. Now, this should be a lightweight method, that is, not executing a lot of code. This is because the onResume method could be executed frequently depending on how often the user navigates away from and back to the application. When the user navigates away from the app, the onPause method is invoked. In this method, typical actions are to commit changes, save variables and preferences, and stop animations. And the onPause method should also be lightweight code. In the onDestroy method, typical actions are to close databases, release resources, and stop background threads. In the onStart method, typical actions are to register broadcast receivers and reinitialize states. In onRestart, server connections are opened and resources allocated. And in the onStop method, server connections are closed, resources freed, and broadcast receivers unregistered. In the developer's website, there's a section on implementing lifecycle callbacks, and that link is here. We pull up that page. We've already used the onCreate method in our first app, and using the other methods is done in a similar fashion, as you can see here. Notice, however, that the save instance state bundle is only passed as a parameter in the onCreate method. Another way to refer to these methods is callbacks. That is, your code is registered to be called back when the activity lifecycle method is executed. To help in restoring your activity after users navigate away and then back again, Android provides the onSaveInstantState method and onRestoreInstantState method. You can save your activity state in the onSaveInstantState method and restore your state in the onCreate or the onRestoreInstantState method. And you can read more about how to do this by following the link here to the developer's website. Now let's review the approach we took in understanding the Activities API. We looked at the major aspects with a reference to the Activities component description on the developer's website. And we looked at key and required capabilities, and we researched details as needed using the Activity class documentation. Now, this is a pattern we'll repeat as we explore more Android capabilities, but we don't have the time in this course to examine every detail of every Android component, class, and method. In fact, this would be difficult or impossible to do in a course of any length. One purpose in this course is to show you how you can use the Android documentation to figure out what you need to know to address whatever challenges you face in your app development projects. So that's a look at Android activities, and they're the backbone of Android apps. We'll be looking at the other app components in coming lessons.